Okay, so this is my first test. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I need to close my door, first of all. So hold on. Okay. Um, I have literally no idea what I'm going to do with this. I'm just talking out of my ass to see where this goes because I feel like, in some sort of way, maybe this is going to be therapeutic for me. And hopefully it'll help people that maybe have gone through similar situations. I guess the point of all of it is just to kind of open perspectives, help people out, and for me to kind of process. I think one of the biggest things, like why I've always wanted to podcast, is because um, I love to write. I love writing. And for a while, the reason I got into the beginning of me wanting to kind of podcast is actually because when I lived in LA, so I love to write. Writing is like my way to process and express my emotions, and also even just like I already said process, but like just to like digest like what I'm feeling, because like when you write it all down, it's like almost like it escapes your head. But in LA, I used to smoke a lot. And so when I would smoke weed, it would be very difficult for me to write. So what I started doing is I used to do voice memos. And so I would do a lot of journal entries through voice memos. And then I would play them back, and it would just be very interesting to hear myself say it. And in some sort of way, it felt like I was speaking to someone else. Um, and in some sort of way, I was, because now I have all these voice memos in my phone, and they're really just past versions of myself and what I was experiencing at that time. And I'm so happy that I did it because my mental space of where I used to be versus where I'm at now is just a complete 180. I was super fucking depressed before. And I just didn't think, it's not that I didn't think it was possible, but at the time, I had no idea how I was going to get myself out of the mindset that I was in. And now that I'm finally out of it, I feel like um, it's not like the first time that I'm looking back at it. And I actually haven't listened to a lot of my voice memos in a while. And I think that maybe it'll be a process. And maybe that's like something I'll do, is like I'll cut some of the old audio clips and fit them into the podcast that I'm doing to kind of analyze what I was going through. So I think that'll be interesting. But yes, so that is kind of what got me into the thoughts of podcasting. I love to have meaningful conversations. I like to unpack just experiences, and I like to reflect. I like to have just deep conversations. So this is day one. I don't know if this will actually even go out there. It's just to kind of brainstorm, and I'm sweating my ass off, so you're going to have to hold on. So, actually, originally, what I wanted my first podcast episode to be, and I feel like some people will probably think that this is like kind of strange, but I really wanted my first episode to be with my ex fiance. Um, the reason for that being, sorry, excuse me, is because I feel like that was the beginning of the end of one chapter. And I feel like only recently have I gotten to the end of that chapter. So the beginning of that end was fucking 4 years ago. So it took 4 years to end that chapter is really what I felt like. And looking in hindsight, there were probably a lot of times that I thought, oh, okay, so like I'm in this next chapter of my life. But I don't actually think that I don't think that I didn't enter the next chapter of my life up until recently. So yes, that's almost 4 years ago. And that relationship was, you know, it was a very um, emotionally traumatic experience for me, on top of just like everything that else that was going on in my life. And, I definitely will go through and talk about a lot of that. And I'm actually really curious to listen to some of those voice memos, while I was kind of working through a lot of those issues, which, has spanned over, expanded a word? I don't, expanded. I don't know why I can't talk all of a sudden. Um, it's expanded over, 4 years, and the healing never stops, and it will come up time and time again. And the thing is, when it comes to healing, it feels like it's never ending in the beginning, and then it gets easier. And it's like only every now and then when I get kind of triggered that those old feelings will come up. And then by that point, you know how to cope with whatever you're feeling. So, that is what I wanted my first episode to be, but due to like personal reasons that I absolutely respect, he cannot participate, which is okay. I think for me, I just really wanted it to be like a therapeutic kind of conversation, because even though we are not in contact, and even though I've gone through a lot of phases of being very, very angry at him, and I would say probably hating him at some points, now that I'm out of it, I can say that um, there was a very complicated friendship there. I wouldn't say that he was the best lover, but the foundation of our friendship was what I respected. And in some other ways, there was not a lot of respect. So it's a very gray space. It's not obviously not black and white. And I take accountability in some of those things. And, from the story that probably most people know, it's probably very easy to blame my ex fiance. His name is Ryan. So just if I refer to Ryan, that is his name. And he already knows that I'm going to be discussing this. So thank you, Ryan, for agreeing. I don't actually know if you ever agreed, but I'm doing this, and you've been knowing that I was going to do this. So this is not to like slander his name. It's actually to talk about both sides of a relationship and how it takes two, and there's accountability on both sides. With the exception of like, I'm not talking like physically abusive relationships or things like that. I'm talking just like, normal relationships that have the red flags and the toxicity, which I feel like a lot of us probably go through. Anyways, yeah, so he will not be able to have this conversation with me, but I will try my best to relay his perspective. And I can't speak for him, but it's just the way that I've been able to process our breakup and our relationship in general. And hopefully I can represent him well. We'll see if he ever listens to this. and I don't know, I guess like, should I just jump into it? I guess, and then I'll listen back and see if I can find any clips about what I was actually going through. Um, I honestly don't even know where to start. um, I guess we'll start with just my relationship in general. So I moved to Los Angeles in 2013. I think I was 23 years old at the time, 22, turning 23. And Ryan and I both worked at a restaurant called Yard House. We were both servers there. And we met. I didn't particularly like Ryan when I first met him. It wasn't that I didn't like him like that, is basically. But he was a very persistent individual. I will give him that. And he somehow convinced me to go out to lunch with him one day. Mind you, it was actually a pretty hilarious lunch. We went out to sushi. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I remember at the time I had just gotten to LA. And for anyone that has been to Chicago and been to LA, Chicago is a very fucking clean city. Like the air is nice, you can breathe, the city is clean. And then you get to LA and it's fucking pollution and trash everywhere. It's fucking dirty. Like I know that people assume like LA is like Beverly Hills. Like no, that's not real LA, okay? So when I moved to LA, my fucking allergies were so bad, dude. I remember specifically, like, not only were my allergies super bad, but I also have eczema that flares up. And I remember my skin was breaking out so bad when I first got there. So the first time I ever went to lunch with Ryan, I was like blowing my nose like the entire fucking time. And I just didn't give a shit what he thought. Like, it's probably not ladylike. I probably was super disgusting. And so, and then I remember, I think he actually came into the apartment. At the time, I was living in this like 3-floor apartment, which was a nice apartment. I was living with my brother and his girlfriend, and then their roommate and her boyfriend. And I lived in the loft, so I didn't really have a door. And I just remember bringing Ryan in that day, which is crazy that I would bring him into the apartment on like this. I mean, we had been talking at work before that, so it wasn't like this was like the first time we were meeting. But and I remember the look on my brother's face was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" So I don't really remember what happened. Like, I don't even know what we did like after that. So that was the first time we ever hung out, and then we kept hanging out, and then we eventually started dating. So that was 2013. Um, and without discussing the entire relationship, um, we got engaged in the end of 2018, in December of 2018, and I'm going to go ahead and tell my perspective, and then we'll go back and we'll point out where there's accountability on both sides. So basically, what happened is we got engaged. We were traveling through Spain. We were visiting one of my friends that was living there at the time. And I knew that I didn't know for sure I guess I assumed that he was going to propose sometime in Spain because we had looked at rings together. So, like, the surprise factor was like, so we had already, like, the summer before. So we went to Spain end of November, I think. And, yeah, end of November into December. And so we had gone ring shopping like that past summer, the summer before that. So I already knew like it was coming. So we got engaged in Sevilla in the Plaza de Sevilla, which is a really beautiful plaza. And it's funny, people ask me if I have certain feels about that place, and I do not. I still think it's a beautiful place. I still very much so would love to go back and experience it again. Um, so we got engaged, and I believe on December 1st, we got engaged. And then we left Spain and we came back home. We had an engagement party, kind of welcome home party where all of our friends were there. Also, I believe my family was there too. Yeah, my parents were there, which was nice to like come back to. I think they were spending the holidays with us that year. And so, sorry, excuse me. We got back on, I don't know. I don't know what day we got back. I think we came back like early December. But basically, I'm going to cut out most of this fucking bullshit, I think, maybe. 10 days later, and I don't know why I remember that it was 10 days. I do remember, is because I just remember that I really only enjoyed my engagement for 10 days. But I basically found out that I'm trying to decide how much in detail I want to go about this, because there is some part of this that I would like to keep to like myself and between like me and Ryan, just like out of respect. But long story short is I found out that Ryan had been, I want to say, emotionally involved with a coworker. And the truth is, I kind of already knew this. I think that I had seen the signs way before. I mean, very early on, actually. I just made excuses, and I guess like there was a part of me that also like just didn't want to like really believe it. But yes, I found out, and basically it sounded like Ryan was unsure if he wanted to get engaged. And he wasn't necessarily telling me this, but he was telling her this. So I found that out, and yeah, it's actually kind of crazy. I found out my parents had been staying with me and Ryan, which was even more rough that I found out while my parents were staying in our apartment. And it was the last day that my parents were there before they were going to fly back to Chicago. So I guess they weren't staying for Christmas. Um, and so, and I actually wonder, like, because me and Ryan were arguing that night and my parents were sleeping upstairs, and I ended up, okay, so I ended up going to sleep downstairs. And I'm trying to think of like how much I want to say about this. So I mean, I'm gonna go. I have no shame. So basically, look, the reality is Ryan was addicted to his phone, addicted to his fucking phone. And Ryan, you will not fucking fight that statement because you totally were. And all throughout the fucking trip, while we were in Spain, he was on his phone. He was on his phone messaging this girl. Okay. So like, I specifically remember we were in the car, and I think I told him like, if you don't get off your phone, I'm gonna literally throw your phone out the window. It was so wild to me. And like at the time, I was upset, but I wasn't nearly as upset after processing, after knowing all of this, after figuring all of this out, and then looking back at our trip and knowing that like he was messaging her like a lot of that time, where it's like he just like wasn't, I felt like he wasn't as present as he could have been while we were out traveling in Spain. But yes, he was addicted to his phone. And so Ryan and I ended up arguing that day, that it was the day before my parents left. And there was, when I tell you, the female intuition never lies. Like, ladies, please listen to that. But there was just something in me where I was like, and I don't like, I'm not really, I wouldn't say I'm like a jealous girlfriend. I'm not like a crazy girlfriend. I swear. I'm sure that most people say that. I mean, now looking in hindsight, like now I feel like I might be a little bit crazy, but at the time I just like didn't really care. And I feel like that also says a lot about the relationship too. But there was just something in me that was like, you better look at that motherfucker's phone. So while Ryan was asleep, I went through his phone and then I found all these messages. And you know what this bitch did? This bitch being me. I screenshotted all of those messages and I sent them to myself and I reread them. I don't even know how many times that night. If you could understand, like, I was fuming. I was fuming laying next to this man who was passed the fuck out because he was drunk. Um, I was fuming. Like, I could have choked him in his sleep. But lucky for him, all I did was I went downstairs and I went to sleep. I went to sleep downstairs. I can't remember exactly what I said to him, but I messaged him. I screenshotted all of those and I clearly left the messages like to me, like sending it to my phone. And then he woke up in the middle of the night and I think that he saw all of that. And so we were like downstairs, like arguing. And I wonder if my parents heard what was going on. I don't really know. I feel like my mom, maybe. My mom's a really light sleeper, and you could hear everything in that apartment, even though it was like she was on the second floor and I was on the first floor. So that happened. And then I flew home to Chicago without my parents knowing. I flew home and I stayed at my best friend's apartment. And she was on her way to go see her fiance's family for Christmas in Ohio, I believe. So she had an empty apartment basically. And so, which was actually like, even though I was sad that she wasn't going to be there, I probably needed some time to myself. So I had the apartment to myself. So I flew back to Chicago and I kind of just cried for how many days straight? I cried for a very long time. I just sobbed my eyes out. I remember like my best friend Scotty came and, he made me dinner, which was actually a hilarious experience. And, he gave me a good few laughs and he listened to me and, I don't know why I'm going to cry right now, but he was just very supportive. I think Scotty, was the first person that I had seen in person since like leaving LA and then getting to Chicago. And so, sorry, it really meant a lot to me to just have him there. Because, oh God, I'm telling you, when you're like, I don't know, I just feel like I remember all of this like it was just yesterday, but like just like some context, like, and that I don't know if I'll unpack all of it right now, but I was extremely lonely in that, like towards the end of that relationship. And I had been feeling pretty lonely in that relationship for a while. And no one really knew like the reality of the relationship. It was just kind of me because like I wanted to protect Ryan and I wanted to protect our relationship. Like I didn't want anyone to feel a certain type of way about Ryan, especially if like, I was choosing to marry this man, right? And this is before we got engaged. Like, like
And so, yeah, so Scotty was the first person that I saw. Um, I can't really remember how much of an emotional wreck I was, but I just remember that it was just so relieving to just like have him there, and talk to him, and I don't know, it was like he's so like level headed, and it was like everything that I wanted. I never knew that I wanted to hear that he just said, and it wasn't like bashing Ryan or anything. It was just more like, like we're here for you, and like whatever you need, and whatever you choose to do, like we support you, and this is why I love my male best friends. Like all of them are like this, and so it was just definitely something I needed at that time. And so, yes. So I have a very, very big soft spot for Scotty, and who I've been friends with since I was like fucking 11 years old. So, anyways, so I went home, and I went home for, I can't remember. It might have been like a couple weeks. And I was trying to decide if I was going to, and this is the crazy part, is that I hadn't decided whether or not I was going to leave this relationship or if I was going to stay in it. And which is crazy because, I think any normal human being would be like, oh, I gotta get out of this relationship. This person doesn't want to marry me. And the fact that I was still debating whether or not I was going to leave the relationship, I think goes to show where my self-esteem was at, and like my self-worth and my self-respect. And um, yeah, so, but he wanted to still work things out, or so he said. So he's told me that he wanted to work things out, right? And so I went home to kind of decide whether or not that was going to be something that I wanted to do. Eventually, Christy came back, and we were able to spend, my last few days there together, which was like so nice. Um, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, I got back to LA, and I decided that I wanted to work things out with him. And so we told each other that we were going to try to work things out, um, which obviously was not very easy. So we stayed together for about almost another 2 years. We broke up in October of 2020, and and that oh my god, just a big FYI for everyone, I'm such a crier, so I will be crying definitely through these episodes. Um, but those last couple years were very difficult. Um, we were both really depressed, and yeah, it was a very difficult time, and uh, we were trying to work it out, and then basically, um, in actually the end of September of 2020, I went through his phone again, and he was still talking to the same girl, and had told her that he basically didn't want to get married, and some other things. I mean, this time I didn't go as far back as I did the first time. I just read what I needed to read. And then I swear the universe lines everything up for you, because the day that I found out, the next day I was actually leaving to Lake Arrowhead with some of the people that I worked with. And then I left for Lake Arrowhead. I took some shrooms with them. I had the most amazing shroom trip, laying next to the lake. And it's funny because I think a lot of people were kind of worried that I was going to have a bad trip because of everything that had just happened. But and I think this is kind of how I knew it was like time to leave the relationship. Um, it's because like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm so sorry. I mean, I'm not really sorry, but um, I remember we were laying on a dock and right, by the lake, and I remember it was like maybe the afternoon, and the sun was kind of coming down, and I remember the sun was like shining on the lake, and I remember I just felt so relieved, which was like such a crazy feeling. I mean, yeah, of course I was sad, but I think more so I felt just like really relieved in that moment, and uh, and it was like I knew that like I was gonna leave this time around. So that is what happened. So I found out. I went to Lake Arrowhead. I came back, decided that I was going. We weren't gonna do this anymore, and then we ended up living together for another month and a half, which was pretty brutal. It was so fucked because um, obviously we were living together, and also I think a part of me, oh God, there's so much to unpack here because this falls into another story, but that is for another episode. But it was hard for me to put my plan into action of finding a new apartment. And, at the time, like my credit wasn't well. I mean, my credit still isn't great. Not much has changed. But I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to get an apartment. And I didn't want to live with anyone, especially not at that point. Like, I was just going through way too much. I couldn't imagine having a fucking roommate. And so at the time, I was working with my brother, and his boss was able to help me get an apartment, which was super helpful at the time. And that will fall into a completely different timeline that I will discuss at a later time. But yeah, I didn't move out for another month and a half, which was so fucked because, um, you know, I think I tried my best to just like stay civil. I didn't really want to argue, even though there were definitely arguments that happened within that time frame. Um, so it was like I would leave for work and be absolutely crushed and at a loss for words of what was happening. I just couldn't fully comprehend what was going on. I mean, I was just trying to work to distract myself, but also my emotions were all over the place. And at the time I was working with all guys, and so I didn't want to cry at work, right? So I was just holding all of my emotions in. I was just fucking, I don't even know how I was doing it. I have now, knowing that I'm such a fucking crybaby, I don't know how the fuck I went into work every day and just did not sob. Like, and so I would go to work and just like act like everything was fine. And then I would go home and try to be as civil as I could. So it was just a lot of me swallowing my own emotions and just not really being able to grieve properly for like a good while. And so it was very difficult. And then my brother helped me get movers. And I didn't pack any of my things until like literally the day before the movers came. The movers were so pissed at me because I had shit in like garbage bags. Like I had not packed any box. I had maybe like four big boxes, like Balak Bayan boxes of things, and then like a bunch of garbage bags. And they were like, bitch, what the fuck is up with all these damn garbage bags? But thankfully, they still moved the garbage bags. But I remember it was, I remember that time frame of like trying to pack my things up. I mean, it must have been like about 12 hours before the movers were coming that I decided to start actually packing my shit up because I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I actually remember, I think it just hadn't hit me for a while that I was actually moving out. And what really happened, and this is the first time I actually had a panic attack, but me and Ryan had been collecting records, like vinyls. And he one night brought up, like, he said something that really pissed me off. I think he said something about, like, well, that vinyl is mine. And I was like, oh, okay, you want to play that game? So then we ended up starting, like, splitting up the vinyls. And that was like the first conversation about splitting up our things. And then I remember I had a full blown panic attack. Like I literally thought I was going to die. I don't know how long it lasted. I just remember I couldn't fucking breathe. And it was extremely scary. And I was so exhausted after it. It felt like it lasted for like ever. Um, and then, yeah, and then it took a while for me to get the courage up to pack my things after that. And then I remember giving back my engagement ring, which I know lots of people have feelings about. Everyone's like, you should have kept the ring. And sometimes I think about that. I'm like, should I have kept the ring? But I think I still stand true in my decision to give it back. Because everyone's like, oh well, you could have traded it in and used the money for an apartment or whatever to help yourself out. But for me, it was like it was just too much. It was too much for me. Like the meaning of the ring, and just I mean, that's a whole nother thing, just like weddings in general. And that's something I'll get into maybe later, but the meaning of the ring, the thought of having to go and trade it in for money, like what? Like, I don't even know if I can emotionally do that. And then also it was a pride thing. Like, I don't want your fucking money. Fuck you, is really what I felt at that time. And I think also deep down, I knew that like, I think I had felt so disrespected that I was like, I don't want your help. Like I'm gonna do this on my own and I'll figure it out. You know, like I don't need your fucking money. Is what it really was for me. And so I gave him the ring back, and then I remember finally getting to my apartment by myself. This is the first time that I'm living in an apartment solo. I've always had roommates throughout my life. And I can't tell you the relief I felt. It was just a sense of relief, is really what it was. Like, of course, I just bawled my eyes out. I thought that whole process of me moving, like, was never going to end. I literally felt like I was never going to get to the point where I was in my new apartment. And when I finally got there, it was such a relief. I cried for I don't even know how long. And then I remember I wish I had my journals. I feel like I could remember it a little bit better. And maybe that's something like I'll go grab when I go home. But I just remember I was writing and I was smoking weed. And I remember I was just crying. And then I ended up like dancing around the apartment by myself that day. And it just felt really good. And it felt very freeing. So um, that I think is like where I'm going to stop. And I will pick up on more of that later, but that's just a little bit more about my experience. Um, and we'll kind of see where we get to unpack some of that. So thanks for listening.